And so if we grew up, which we did, in this dichotomy of like, you're either this or this, but you're a human being. You're not just this or this. You're this and 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 this. But you're only allowed to think of yourself as this or this. It really limits you.
Yeah.
It limits the way that you can see yourself, which limits the way that you can see the world, which limits your thoughts, which limits your actions, which limits your results.
Welcome to Life is a Game, hosted by yours truly, Alexandra Nicole Stone. Get ready to uncover the secrets to mastering your destiny, becoming the main character in your life, and embracing a life filled with meaning and joy. Ready? Let's play. Hello and welcome to Life is a Game. I'm your host, Alexandra Nicole Stone, and I'm super excited to introduce you to Amparo Vazquez today. Amparo is a survivor of covert narcissistic abuse, which resulted in her developing CPTSD and PTSD. She has spent the last few years not just healing, but using her experience to help others heal from abuse and systemic abuse. She is now the founder of Azteca, where she helps women reclaim their feeling of worthiness and joy after hardship, to step into fulfillment, purpose, and as well as global purpose. Her approach is to address the core causes of loss of identity and fire, bringing people back to themselves. Her work includes speaking, coaching, meditations, workbooks, workshops, and a recently launched group program for women called I Am Worthy. Thank you so much for joining me today, Amparo.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I'm very happy to be here.
I love the energy already. So I'm super excited for our recording or for our interview. It's going to be a really good one. I just wanted to start off by asking you just a little icebreaker question. Growing up, was there ever a game or a game-like concept that positively impacted your life?
Yes. So context is that I wasn't really allowed to play a lot of games growing up. I grew up in a very traditional Mexican home, even though I grew up in the US. And so the games that I did play, they stayed with me.
Yeah.
Some of them were like puzzle games, Pokemon. But when I was in high school, I played Final Fantasy X2. And that was the first time that I had ever played an RPG after watching my brothers play RPG for years. It was an incredible experience because, for anyone that doesn't know, X2 is the first Final Fantasy, possibly the only Final Fantasy game that stars women, 3 female characters. And I've always gravitated towards media that highlighted primary female characters. There were very few growing up. So every time that I found something, I got very excited. I gravitated towards that. And so seeing a game that was all about women, and it was diverse in its representation of women, right? So one was the healer, one was the strong person, and then another one was like, I think she was the assassin thief or something like that.
Yeah, I love that.
I loved it. So it was a really great experience. I was very dedicated to that game. I got up until the very last battle, and then the game was sold, and I was very sad. But the game itself, it was very important for me to have found that game at that time.
And what do you think about it, like besides just like having the women like protagonists or the main characters being women really sort of inspired you? How did that sort of maybe change your perspective of life a little bit?
Yeah, so it speaks to how important it is to see people like you represented in the stuff that you consume, right? And so I grew up watching a lot of superhero cartoons, a lot of shows in general, a plethora of shows. And a subcategory of that was superhero cartoons. Most of them are male dominated, right?
Yeah.
So the first time that I saw Batgirl on screen, it was like a life-changing moment for me because I finally saw a woman. I finally could see myself there. It wasn't just me trying to extract the qualities of someone that I didn't feel any sort of resonance with. I couldn't see myself in them, right? So it's the same thing with this game where I was like, gosh, this is so exciting. This is so cool. I'd seen my brothers play it. That's why I chose it, because I'd seen them play it first. And I thought it was so cool for so many reasons that this game existed, that my brothers were playing it, that the characters on screen, they weren't just presented as one type of person, you know? And so another reason why that was so important to me is because at that time, media representations of women were very one-dimensional. They were very like, this is what a woman is. And it was frustrating and confusing to me because we're not one thing, right?
Yeah.
But the way that I framed it in my head at the time was, I am not one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are a lot of other women. Maybe the vast majority of the world of women is like that because that's what you think, right? That's the only
Yeah.
thing that you consume. So that's what you think. But I'm not like that. Like I'm a soft healer, but also
Yeah.
I'll kick someone's ass,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm both. I'm all of this in between. So getting a chance to see all of that, it was so important. It was so important to see these elements of myself, even if they were split up multiple characters. Seeing them was important.
I really love that you said that. And I think it kind of brought me, it's brought something to my attention where, like, I never thought about that because I was like, oh, you're just playing like guy characters. But I do remember like the first role playing game where it did have a female protagonist, or where I would get to build my own female character and be like, oh my God, like women are sexy, women are badass. And
Yeah.
I'm playing at that. I remember how exciting that is. And I think there's something really interesting in identity there, because I think if you were the type of girl that was really into video games or like a little bit more tough stuff, you were automatically bucketed as a tomboy.
Yeah.
And I think, growing up, I was like really into princesses and stuff like that. But then kind of, 9 years old or after I got my PlayStation, I was like, oh, I love video games. I love, sports and stuff. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're bucketed into this like tomboy character. And I don't know if it's the same thing for like the kids growing up these days, because everything's a little bit more flexible. But I felt like your identity is either like, oh, I am a girly girl, or you're that other. And which is the
Yeah.
other was like the tomboy. But it's like,
Yeah.
I think the role of the female, I'm getting goosebumps right now. The role of the female is like, we are strong, like we are sexy, we're feminine, we can be girly, we can kick butt, and we can have all
Yeah.
those things. I've never really thought about video games in that way. I'm super glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of a person's identity is so much more important than the average person knows or is allowed to know, right? Like how you perceive of yourself dictates your thoughts, it dictates your actions, which dictates your results, which dictates like the next X years of your life, because we're always perpetuating the same stuff unknowingly. And so if we grew up, which we did, in this dichotomy of like, you're either this or this, but you're a human being. You're
Yeah.
not just this or this. You're this and 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 this. But you're only allowed to think of yourself as this or this. It really limits you.
Yeah.
It limits the way that you can see yourself, which limits the way that you can see the world, which limits your thoughts, which limits your actions, which limits your results.
I love that you bring that up, because like that's the whole point of life is the game, and like why I've started this podcast and why I'm trying to like share this message is because like when you start looking at your life as a game and you as that main character, maybe it's not the same identity you affiliate with, like the identity you get from your parents or from society, but you have this version of you in your mind where you're saying like, I'm the healer, I'm the badass, like I'm all those things, right? I can be sly and sexy too, and dorky and funny.
Hell yeah.
Those are all aspects of who I am, right? And so if
Yes.
we start building that like main character, or that idealized version of ourselves, and we start connecting to it versus it being this far off
Yeah.
thing, like, oh, I can never be that person. This is the ideal
Yeah.
version of me in my head. But it's
Yes.
like, no, that person is you already. You're already that person. And that's why those thoughts are coming into your head.
Yes. Yeah.
You
So
know?
yes. So one of the things that I'm very intentional about doing for myself and for anyone that I talk with, either like as friends or especially as clients, because this is where I'm really allowed to do this as a coach of clients, right?
Mhm.
I get them into that mental state. I get them into that mental, emotional, energetic space of like, what is this person that you want to become? Really hone in on the details of what she looks like. And I do work to help them to think about that person as a whole human being, right? So again, not just one thing or this thing, but the entirety of it. And then have them reside in that mental space so that they can feel it in their bodies. Because when you can feel it in your body and you can start to visualize yourself as that person, you start to take different actions. You start to have access to different
Exactly.
thoughts. Like there's a huge domino effect to being able to have access to this concept of you as a whole human being that is also like more of an idealized version of yourself, not to say perfection. Perfection is a completely different thing, right? But like a healthier version of myself.
Yeah.
A version of myself that is safe to explore the world and do all sorts of stuff, right? That version of myself. I'm there. I start to feel that it's possible for me to be there. I start to take different action because now it's possible.
I love that. It's like, what does your main character talk like? How do they walk, right? You were complimenting me on all my red, right?
Yeah.
Maybe before I'd be shy. I'm like, oh, this is too
Yes.
much red. It's too bright. I'm like, you know what? I'm allowed to play. I'm allowed to have fun, right? Like, we're doing the podcast. We're showing up, right?
Yes.
We're being that version of ourselves that are in our head. So why not, right? Because really, like, you can always combat whatever negative thought you have by saying, really,
Yes.
why not? Because it's all just excuses, you know? You
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
yourself, people need to give themselves permission to have
Yes.
fun.
Yes. To experiment, to try things out. So one of the things that came up for me as you were talking, it's like, as a character, depending on the game, right?
Mhm.
I can easily choose to just change out my clothes
Yeah.
that represents a completely different identity.
Yes.
And yeah, clothes has a huge impact on how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us. And that can have a big impact on the parts of us that come out, right? Which makes me think of something else. My brain's jumping all over the place. Makes me
I
think of
love it.
something else. It makes me think of this experiment that was done,
Mm.
that a school in a classroom, a teacher wanted to see the impact that it can have on a child's identity if they're treated as a good student regardless versus a bad student regardless, right? And so it didn't matter what the grades were of the actual students to begin with. 50% were classified as good, something like that. Like a percentage of them were classified as good, a percentage of them were classified as bad, and they were treated accordingly. Over time, in this cohort, the students that were treated as good students, there were a number of them that were actually on the lower end of the spectrum, like D's, F's, that kind of thing. Over the course of that experiment, they rose to the expectations of good student. Over here, the opposite happened. So the students who had been A students were treated as bad students and their grades lowered according to the treatment that they were receiving, right? So putting that all together, how we present ourselves, how we conceptualize of ourselves, how others treat us, it's all interrelated and it all has an impact one on the other. And if we can think of ourselves as this main character, thereby grabbing onto self-agency and holding on, we can say, okay, this has an impact and I can change at any point.
Yeah.
I want to feel like a badass. What do I think a badass looks like? I'm going to dress like a badass. I'm going to see how I feel. I want to feel safe. Well, what type of things do I think that a person who feels safe in their own skin, who's confident, would have around them? I'm going to go and get those things, just like accessories. Let me go grab some accessories, right? Yeah.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
Yeah.
I love that. And I actually think that what you thought was a tangent is actually a beautiful segue into going into your story and talking about kind of your journey and how you've got to where you are today and maybe the side quests that you've been on. But yeah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a woman of color who grew up in the hood and went off to have 7 great years of life, had a lot of freedom, had a lot of really wonderful experiences, got to see who I actually was in an experience of safety. And then I found myself in an abusive situation. It was covert abuse. Covert abuse is notorious in the world of abuse because it's the hardest to catch for the victim, for others. It's the hardest to catch. And so it ends up doing very often a lot of damage to the victim because they stay longer, because their defenses are lowered, because stuff goes straight into the subconscious. I didn't know that that's what I was living. I was being watched by someone who knew that I was being abused. They rescued me. At that point is when my whole life collapsed and I was out of the abuse. I was out of the gaslighting. Most of what I experienced was mental abuse. And I could make sense of what I had lived. I had suppressive tendencies that I had also unknowingly been employing. It's something that I apparently was doing my whole life. Didn't know. And so finally, in a state of safety, all these repressed memories came to the surface of my psyche. And again, I realized what I had lived. And in that realization of what I lived, with my whole understanding of my whole life completely rewriting itself, my understanding of the world rewrote itself too. Then I started to understand how rampant toxicity is and how there was just so much that I understood and I put together and I connected all these different dots. And I was like, oh man, it's so much more rampant than I could previously understand. Situations where people are stuck in life draining circumstances, whether at home, at work, or by form of some system or enablers of some system. And they're all the same tactics, and they all have the same impact as a result. And so stuff that we normalize as things like burnout, or even stuff that we normalize as signs of aging, it's actually because of abuse.
Yeah.
How do you know? Because you look at someone who's gone through a shit ton of stress and it looks like they've aged 10 years.
You know, I resonate so much with this, and it's really something I don't want to gloss over, because I think that's something really important, because when you're in it, you don't realize it. And we can have a whole nother podcast where I can tell you about my stories and all that. But really, like, I really want to share with the audience, what does covert abuse look like, because
Yeah.
I think when you're in it, it's so hard to realize, especially if, like you're saying, with your romantic partner, because you're like, I love them, but they're treating me so terribly. And they make you think that you're at fault, right? You're at fault for all the failings that are happening, or for not saving them, or for all those different things. But can you please, like, dive into that just a little bit, just so people
Yeah.
can understand, like, oh my gosh, maybe this is happening to me.
Yeah. So covert abuse is part of a spectrum. And the way that I conceptualize covert abuse is death by 1,000 cuts. So it's not obvious, like someone punching you in the face.
Yeah.
It's someone trying to intentionally make you feel bad about yourself by criticizing what you wear, by making you feel jealous, making you feel insecure, by trying to guilt trip you, by trying to shame you, by trying to disrupt this thing that you love and make you doubt yourself about it. So there were a million circumstances like that I experienced that I couldn't tell, that I made excuses for, that other people tried to talk to me about, and I shut them out because I was like, this person means well, they just don't know, they were hurt as a child, like all the stuff that victims all tell themselves to make excuses for it, right? However, there are eruptions that are easier to see, even in that sea, right?
Yeah.
And those eruptions get more pronounced over time, especially the more ensnared you become by the abuser, meaning to go from courtship to more serious dating, to start living with them, to get married to them, to have kids. After you enter into another level of commitment with them, which is really just being ensnared by them, the abuse ramps up. And those explosions, they start to become more obvious and more pronounced and more frequent as well. Here's the bad part, though. By the time that you're progressing through this, you're like a frog being boiled in water. So you're being conditioned over time to think that you're making things up, you're exaggerating, you're the problem, you just have to do more and more and more and more. And you're being isolated from people who can see through stuff, or you're being told like, oh, they just don't like me, or you're being told things that are character flaws about them that may or may not be true or exaggerations of the truth, but they're being told to you for manipulative purposes to make you doubt them, right? So you look to your results. You always have to look to your results. Over time of being with this person, do you see yourself going down in anxiety or more?
Yeah.
Do you see your life getting better or worse? Are you getting into more arguments with them or less? Are you having the same argument over and over and over again to the point where you're just like, I thought we talked about this already. I thought we resolved this already. Yeah. Are you saying the same things over and over again? If you're saying the same things over and over and over again, it means you're not being listened to. And if you're not being listened to, it could be unintentional or it could be intentional. And how do you know the difference when you're in the middle of it? It's really goddamn hard to know. So you use time. If someone genuinely cares about you and you're saying the same thing over and over again, and you tell them, I'm saying the same thing over and over to you again, you say that once, they'll hear you. Yeah. They'll stop. They'll listen. They'll respond compassionately, right? Here's another big tell. When you're not doing well, are they there for you?
Yeah.
Abusers don't give a shit about you at all. And it's most obvious when you can't do anything for them. So when you're sick, when you're not doing well, when you don't have money to give to them, when you don't have resources and influence to give to them, how do they treat you? Do they treat you the same or better than when you did have stuff to give to them? If they don't, that's a tell. There's a lot of like manipulation. There's a lot of deprivation. There's a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of
Yeah.
something called word salad, where they just go round and round and round in logic circles to the point where you just want to beat your head against
Yes.
something.
Yes.
You start to feel like you need to start recording your conversations because you're like, I literally just said this, or you literally just said this thing that you're denying that you said.
Yeah.
The moment you start feeling like you have to record your conversations, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because it means not only have you been gaslit, it means you've been gaslit a lot to get to the point where you need to record conversations.
And I think one of the most unfortunate things is that this happens to strong people. Like,
Yes.
this happens to strong women, strong men, but you said you're Mexican, I'm Romanian. It's a tough culture. It's a lot of tough love in
Yeah.
those cultures. So you're just like, hey, I know tough love. You know, maybe
Yes.
this is just
I'm resilient.
maybe this is just another version of tough love.
Okay.
Like, maybe they didn't mean that way. I don't know. Sometimes maybe your dad or your mom says something hurtful, or, you know, they're just like, they're trying to
Stop
help
being too
you.
sensitive.
Yeah. So you're just like, oh, maybe it's one of those cases, but it's not, you know? So I think that's like one of the things is, if you're a strong person, I think you're actually more vulnerable
Yes.
to this than if you weren't. It's kind of
Yes.
like if you ever played a role-playing game or a video game where you've gotten poisoned. And it's like, you're a very, very strong character. For that poison to start taking effect,
Yeah.
you know, it takes some time, right? But as you get weaker and weaker, and as you start having less and less life, the poison gets stronger and stronger, right? You're too busy with life. You don't notice that you're poisoned. You're too busy with life. You're like, I have to go to college, or I have to go to work, you know, I don't have time for this, or you just brush it off the shoulder. But the thing is, like, when it gets to that critical point at the end, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I need to find the antidote. And it's so hard to get out of that. You know, unfortunately, some people have to go through it again and again and again until they feel like they're going mad to get out. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, running with that idea, actually, it's very much like you have your strongest
Yes.
character. You take their strength for granted, so you don't even pay attention to the health bar
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention because you're like, they've handled so many other things, they can handle anything, right?
Yes.
Until the screen starts blinking red because you're about to die.
That's perfect. That's exactly what it is. I'm getting goosebumps. That's the exact feeling. So
That's what I realized too. I was like, oh man, me being strong actually worked against me. Yay.
yeah.
Preach.
And the crazy thing about life is that happens to you again and again. Like, I think it's taken me quite a few times of that manifesting in different ways for me to finally get the message, like, you know what? It's not worth it.
Yeah, it only happened once to me, but part of the reason why is because I kept sticking it out because I thought I could handle anything.
Right.
And so I kept sticking it out until I got to the point where I was dying. And then I left. And then all these repressed memories came out. And then I realized what I'd lived. I started to research the hell out of what I'd lived and other people's experience. I saw that other people ended up going through this process multiple times. And I was like, fuck that. Excuse me.
No worries.
I'm not going to do that to myself.
Yeah.
Let me just focus on healing and pulling myself out of this.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I didn't go through like rocky periods in that experience of trying to stay away from repeating the same patterns. I had my very first date that I went on, which was about 1.5 years after escaping, was with a narcissist. And I figured out on the second date. And how did I figure it out was actually by the other tell that I forgot to mention, which is set a boundary. Set a boundary, see what they say. Set a boundary, see if they understand it and they respect it and they vocally acknowledge it, or if they try to tear down your boundary, right? So I set a boundary with this person and he wasn't having it. He got very passive aggressive and like silently raging. And my heart started to race because I knew what this was like. But I also was like, I can see it now.
Yeah.
This will never happen to me again. I can see it.
I love that. So, you know, it sounded like you're kind of playing a game that you didn't want to play anymore, right?
Yes.
Where, like, sometimes life is a game. You know, this is the part that people don't talk about. Sometimes life is a game that you're like, where's the off switch? But there's no off switch because it's life. It's not a game, you know?
Yeah.
And so how did you get to that like aha moment where you realize that you can get out of it, that you have free will, that you can turn your life around? How did you quote unquote escape, or how did you get through that hardship and start being joyful and living your life?
Yeah. So it wasn't by choice at first. I was simultaneously being replaced. I had been replaced and I was dying. And he was also trying to construct a story that made it seem like it was my fault and it was my decision, and it was complicated. So I was dying, I had to leave, and at the same time, he was still trying to keep me around for his own purposes.
Yes.
And I was dying. So someone who had been keeping an eye on me literally sent me a text saying, "Do you need a rescue mission?" Didn't know that this language was going to come at me. So I was rescued because of that experience. And then it was afterwards that I went through this really awful period of time of breaking. But then my strength came back. I had felt so weak by the end of that experience. I felt so broken. I didn't feel at all confident. My self-conception was completely broken. It was very much like the screen flashing red.
Yeah.
But like bright red and daggers flying out. Like it was bad. It was really, really bad.
Because it's the grief. It's like you're feeling a loss, even if that person was terrible to you. You feel that grief. You feel that pain. You know.
Yeah, and also you're actually feeling a lot of loss. I had brain damage when I left. I had trauma. I had PTSD. It was very severe when I lived. And so it was like the loss of who I used to be, the loss of the concepts that I thought that I had, the loss of my own mental faculties, like the loss of money. I was in very big debt because of what he had done. But it was after that initial like awful coming to terms with the fact that I was living a reality and had lived a reality that I got my strength back. And I realized, no, who I used to be was someone who could pull herself out of stuff, and I can do it again. And this sucks, but it's less awful than what I just came from. And I kept that perspective every single sort of ledge that I would climb up. It's like the next stage was awful. It was not as awful as the thing before. Yeah. So I kept doing the same thing, leveling up.
Yeah.
Right?
I call it remembering your reason for playing. I went through my own version of that experience, but also lots of trauma and PTSD, and I felt like destroyed, and I had forgotten about this whole life as a game thing. Like that had left the mind, right? I felt like very much a victim. And I remember I was like healing from the inside out, and I ordered this book, and I butcher the author's name every single time. Noam Naim or something, but it's called Healing from the Inside Out. And in it, it's saying like creating this mantra. And it was basically saying that like, I can no longer suffer from this ailment or this condition, right, anymore, because I'm here for a purpose. And that lit my fire up. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you're right. There's people here that I can help. I wanted to be, even before all that chaos happened, like I wanted to help others. I wanted to become a public speaker, right? I wanted to do all these great things, but this life journey had depleted me of all my HP, of all my MP, was like magic power, right? I was completely depleted. But in reading that statement, I was like, fuck that. That's not going to get to me. I have things to do. I'm here to do things. And even if I don't know exactly what those things are, like people need me, and I'm here to be of service, and I got work to do. So this is not going to destroy me. Right. And even if you don't know what that work is, like, I know I got work to do, you know?
Yeah, same thing. I've always been very service-oriented too. And so immediately when I came out and I started to realize what it was, immediately that protective, service-oriented self came out. Yeah. And I was like, one of my very first thoughts was, he has other victims. He has other targets. Yes. What can I possibly do to protect them? Okay, I'm going to do this and this and this. And then I'm going to detach because now I need to focus on my own healing. And that's it. But at some point I recognized my turning this into purpose was saving my life. Yeah. I knew that, And so, completely resonate with that.
And so like after this aha moment, or like once you started realizing you had free will, how did you start changing your perspective about life? And like, how did you start making different decisions? How did that start impacting you, right? When you realize like, I got stuff to do. Like I'm on a mission. I'm getting better, right? The healing phase, I'm sorry, guys. Healing takes such a long time. 5 years sometimes. I mean, it's not a 6-month process. So during the healing process, you're like, am I healed yet? I'm doing the work. No.
Yeah, mine took 4 years.
It's incredible. Like you're like, what? I'm a pretty self-aware person, but the healing, I'm not healed.
Yeah.
What's going on?
because there's so much that was done to you inside and
Yeah.
outside. Your body took on all the stuff that you need to heal from. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, so one thing comes to mind, and before I share that, I do want to share 2 quotes that I thought of when you were sharing the quote that you saw that were really helpful for me. So one was, they tried to bury us. They didn't know that we were seeds.
I get goosebumps. Amazing.
Yeah. The second quote was, just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, it became a butterfly. Speaking to, like, what is it? The night is darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
You know? Both of those really helped me. So in terms of how it changed my perception of life, so many ways. So with regards to my own journey of like climbing through the healing process towards a space where I could help more and more people, which I did throughout this process, there was a visual that I started to create in my head about a year after I escaped, of climbing from ledge to ledge. And it served as like this really great metaphor for the process that I was going through of like, let me just, as best as I possibly can, get to this next stage.
Yeah.
And in the visual, as I like developed it out, which continued to serve as like a really great metaphor, the process of climbing up got easier, just like it did in real life. So the very first visual, I was clawing onto the ledge with just this part of my fingernails for dear life, hanging on to get myself up. But over time, it got easier, and it has helped in a lot of different ways, including to remind me of the process itself of it does get easier over time. It's awful, sucks, but it gets easier over time. And that's how a lot of things are.
Right? It's like when you're playing a game, right? When you first start playing a game, you don't have any weapons, like
Yes.
you're naked, you know, you have no armor, you have like 3 bars of health. You're like, everything is killing me. This sucks. Like,
Yeah.
I need to level up, like, so I can at least enjoy playing the game,
Yeah.
you know? So every time I walk around, I don't just get killed, right?
Yes.
So it's very much that, like, I'm naked,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
That is so appropriate, because one of the things that I figured out too was I couldn't have enjoyed life before in the way that I now know that I have the potential to, because I wasn't strong aware enough to protect myself from the critters around. Right? And I was always a strong person. I was always a self-aware person, but there was so much that I didn't know clearly that led me to that path. So very much like this side quest that I went on, that was also the main journey of my life, but it felt like a side quest. It felt like I was derailed from my purpose. It felt like I was derailed from what I actually wanted my life to look like for this entire time. It was years that it felt like that. Was like being in between 2 big boss battles.
Yeah.
And running around getting strong. At the same time that it turned out that it wasn't just normal bad guys you were fighting. They were all main bosses that you were fighting in between these 2 stages.
Yeah.
You know? But I learned.
I love that you say that, because I just got this visual of like sometimes video games have like story arches, right? And like, like you're in the first part, it's like you're leveling up, you're getting good, and then you are going through those boss battles because you have specific objectives, right?
Yeah.
And it's like surviving, or I just need to get these things. And then you get to that point and you realize, wait, like there's still half a game to go. Like there's still so much playing to go. Like that was just the first portion of the game that I had to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
And that was, you know, even though these things are terrible, I'm not very religious, but I love that quote where it's like, God don't give you anything you can't handle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's like, it's part of the making of us, you know? And after you go through those experiences, like, I don't know, for me, it was like you can die in any moment, like death. Like I had like a death in the family. I had a near-death experience, and I was like, oh my God, you can just, like, life is fleeting. You know, I was like, why am I giving so much of my energy? This is my finite resource. My energy is worth more than gold. And everyone, because when you're a giver and you're strong and you're you're a yes man, right? You're like, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Like everyone's like, yeah, she wants to take it, even if they're not, you know, malicious players. So you're just giving yourself to so many people and so many causes and relationships and stuff. Like you're like, what about me? And so that's why people burn out, because they're just giving so much of themselves away. And God forbid you have like one of these malicious players in your life that are just depleting your energy, right? But you have to sort of remember, my energy is precious. It is my most finite resource. So you have to recalibrate and be like, okay, what am I putting this energy towards? Because I think that's really when you start maturing and saying like, I'm actually going to say no to opportunities, because even though that's a great opportunity and I could do it, it doesn't mean it's the right one for me. You're able to discern from just like living like an animal and just maybe like, yes, 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 or being a soldier on the ground. And then really like stepping back and be like, I'm designing my life. Like, this is what I want to put my life force, my energy towards. Like, this is what I want to build. If I fail, cool, but it's on me. It's not someone else's BS, right? It's on me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And complementary to what you're saying about energy, it's also about what are you allowing to feed your energy, right? Because especially if we're givers, you need to be very conscious of what's giving to you, of what's providing you with life force. And that's food, that's time out in sun. I'm gonna say sunlight.
I haven't got any of that
Time out
today.
in sunlight. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Sun time.
It's community. It's meeting all of your basic needs, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual needs. And if you're a really strong person, you take for granted that you don't need a lot of things. I don't need a lot of things. I don't ask for much.
Yeah.
You should. Because the more that you take in, the more that you can give.
Yeah. And I like to say you are the main character in your life.
Yeah.
It's you. It's not anybody else. And it's a big deal. Like, it's a big deal. It's okay to be selfish. Like, I'm giving you permission. I'm not saying be an asshole, but it's okay to care about yourself and be like, I've been telling a lot of my friends that sometimes you get invited out somewhere. Maybe you feel like saying, and it's okay to say, I have plans. I have plans with myself. Those are valid plans. Like, I just want to Netflix and chill, or I just want to, do face masks, or I just want to read a book or space out, whatever it is. Because we're so, like, we live in such a fast-paced world. Like, we're just like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah. But then you're like, what? I just blinked my eyes and the week is already gone, or 3 weeks are already gone. So it's okay to be selfish. Like, life is about you. It really is. And it's okay. You're going to care about your family. Like, you can care about your loved ones. Like, I'm not saying not to do that. It's about you.
Yeah. It's not just okay to, it's essential to. If you don't prioritize your own needs, who's going to? Who do you expect to, right? What you're saying reminded me of a visual that I saw some time ago of someone wanted to have a visual representation of the number of weeks that they had left to live, that the average person has left to live. When you see a physical representation of the X number of days or weeks or months or years that you have left, it really puts everything into perspective, especially when you account for how much time you have already lived, right? Like, the average human being lives to be about 86 years old, something like that. So what we think of as middle age is not middle age, it's 2/3 age.
Yeah.
Middle age, And when people don't take that into consideration, they don't plan for it. They don't plan accordingly, right? So they get stuck in work mode. They get stuck in burnout after burnout after burnout, like just trying to recover and then getting back on the horse. They get stuck in not pausing. They get stuck in not replenishing. They get stuck in not taking care of their own needs and not doing the things that they love because they think they have all this time in the world.
And the sad part is that they're spending, like, when they're not working, they're daydreaming about that life that they wish they had, or they're bitter because of the life that they wish they had, or they're watching people on Instagram or social media living the life they had, and they're like, why can't that be me? But it's like, it can be you. Like, just get out of your head for a minute. And we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty. I'm preaching this living life as a game thing. And I have to constantly remind myself, like, what would I do if my life was a game? Because it's so hard. We're so impressionable. Like, there's so many external factors that are distracting us from what we actually want and what we actually care about, you know? And so
absolutely.
we just have to stop and be like, you know what? Like, let's just take that risk. Is it really that big of a risk? Let me ask that person I like. Let me not play games. let me just book that trip, even if it's $1,000. Let me just go to Greece or whatever. You're going to end up spending that extra $500 on dinners between now and the time of your, or like $1,000 between now and the time of your vacation anyways. So why not? Because that 1 week of memory, like the people you leave at work, they'll get fine. Everyone will figure stuff out. Your parents, like your grandma, whatever, they will survive without you, and you could come back and do it again. So I want to really encourage people. Like people really need to just try it. You know?
Absolutely. And in combination with that is make it doable.
Make
Make
it
it
doable.
realistic for yourself. Set
Yeah.
yourself up for success, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I encouraged a client/friend of mine recently was she really wanted to travel, but it felt so completely inaccessible to her. And when she shared her life circumstances, like, yeah, that makes sense. So instead of shooting for that as your first goal, then why not start with something much smaller? Why
Yeah.
not look for travel videos on YouTube and on Instagram, right? And she lit up when she heard that because it had not occurred to her that she could do something like that. And doing something like that brought her joy because she got a chance to experience a little bit of the world from the stuff that will eventually lead to her being able to travel. And then a couple months later, she was traveling. I was like, oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, because you learn other people's tips and tricks, right?
Yeah.
You get the cheat codes, to
Yeah,
say.
you get the cheat codes and it makes it more doable for you. So again, when we think about a game, right, you're not going to go to level 100 boss fight right off the bat, right?
That would suck.
Yeah, you're going to die. Once you get it, you'll be dead. So you acknowledge, you take for granted that there's a journey to it and they're incremental steps. So when it comes to any of your goals, any single one of them, they can all be broken down into incremental steps. Every single one of them can be broken down. And part of that, which I always encourage to include this like incremental process leading up to your ultimate goal, there's science behind this, to do the smallest thing, the smallest action that you can take that you still feel good about, that guides you in this direction. That's one of the reasons why I encouraged it. There's no way you can't pick up your phone, open up YouTube or Instagram, like a video. It's easy, right? Easy victory. But then also, watching those videos doesn't just give you great tips. It helps you to start visually putting yourself there. And when you can visualize yourself doing something, your body starts releasing certain chemicals in your body that mirror the experience of actually doing something.
Yeah.
So we know that visualizing yourself being able to run, for example, and you're able to visualize yourself like actually successfully running and having an easy time, it makes it more likely that you will have a more comfortable experience when you actually go for a physical run. Like visualization is so potent, it's so powerful, and the average human doesn't know how powerful it is, which again is why gaming is so important.
No, it's becoming that character, right? Like
Yeah.
I like doing the I never done a podcast 2 months ago, right? But now I'm like, now I have like, obviously I didn't have the lighting and the setup and the mic and all these things. I'm like, my first podcast was like raw, right? But then you build to it. And I love that you said that because I'm actually going through this like struggle right now too, where I'm like, I'm trying to figure out, Instagram and like short format content and reels and stuff. And I've been racking my brain like, oh my God, like what do I have to do to get, 10,000 views on something, right? Because you're stuck and you're getting like 200 views or 1,000 views or something. And it's like, you really just started this. I would say not even a month ago, not even 2 months ago, like a month ago or something. And you really just started researching it and deciding that you want to do this a couple weeks ago. So you have to like give yourself mercy. I'm like, I want to make 5 reels a week, every week, and like, and then I'm sitting there stressed out. Like I've already put this unsurmountable goal. I'm already a failure in my mind, right? When I'm thinking about those things, because I'm like, I don't even know how to make one really good reel with like the transitions and all those things, like for it to be really good quality. So I'm sitting here and saying like, I'm a failure. Like stressed out. It's become this stressful process instead of becoming an authentic, creative process, which is what it's supposed to be about, right? We have a business mindset towards it. We have an objective, right? Like we want to, monetize off like doing good and helping others, right? But then it's like, wait, that's gonna take time, and it's okay.
Yes, time and effort, right? So here's the other thing: is we're all RPG players that are watching
Yeah.
other RPG players, but we don't get to see their stuff.
Yeah.
We just see that they're kicking ass and we're like, they're right next to me. They're kicking ass. Why can't I do that too? But then you find out that they have a team of 5 and they're level 67.
Yeah. And you're level 2 struggling to put the light bulb inside of your the light, you know. That was real talk. That was me just yesterday. I was like, how do I put the light in this like floodlight? Opening the flap and getting, you know, like, okay, this is what nobody shows you. It's like very unglamorous.
Yeah, absolutely. Certain content creators do, and I really value and really appreciate when they do, because they humanize me and they humanize us. They humanize the experience, right? But here's the other thing: is that we're in an environment of forced competition, and the way that it plays out is a single person content creator feels like they're in competition with a team of 20, and we don't know that it's a team of 20. We just know that they're producing the type of content that we feel that we need to be producing from the get-go, you know? So again, that metaphor of like you're 2 characters who are playing right next to each other and you're seeing their results, but you don't know their stat and you don't know their journey to get there. And so, yeah, scaling back, being compassionate towards the self and being okay with those smaller goals, knowing that you're a badass. We're all badasses. We're all badasses.
You're already that person. It's in you.
Yes. You'll get there. Like, to the universal, whatever your goal is, you'll get there. If anything is missing is mindset around how to approach those goals and enjoying the journey and being compassionate towards self. Yeah.
This might segue into my next question, but what does living life as a game mean to you personally?
Oh, man. It's so different now after having lived what I've lived. The concept of life as a game was very present to me before what I went through as an adult. But a few things come to mind. One is it's a reminder that life is meant to be fun. And we can have that approach to think, how can I make this part of my journey a little lighter, a little more supported, a little more fulfilling, so that it can be a little more fun. It's a reminder to always stay in touch with the innocent, childlike part of ourselves, which is when all of us started playing games. It's a reminder that life is about leveling up.
Yeah. Give yourself permission to explore.
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to play. Give yourself permission to wear funky lipstick. Whatever it is that you're like, no, I should do that. Just do it.
Yeah.
I promise. You'll probably get complimented on it. I swear.
Yeah.
I like your blue hair. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to experiment with you, if you can approach life a little bit more lightly as possible when possible and have greater self-agency and think of yourself as the main character, right? And so I'll almost kind of think of yourself as like an avatar of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Is the avatar of you living the life that you want? Are they dressed how you want? Are they the friends that are around them? Do you want that for them? Having that distance from yourself in that way can actually provide a certain level of perspective that you can't have towards yourself, because you're in your body, you're living it, you know?
And that way, that if your avatar doesn't align with your main character version of yourself or your ideal version of yourself, you're like, okay, what missions and what side quests do I need to go on to level up, to start having the network, to start having that relationship, to start having that career, right? Yes. And if you start looking at it like having more fun, and it can be, it can go from micro to macro, right? And you can build that up. So you just decide, like, what are the quests I have to go on? I guess that could be a fun exercise. Today, what quest am I going on? You know, like, that's going to help me get to where I need to be.
Yeah.
You know?
And it includes literally exploring your world. You know, one of my favorite things that I do not see people doing enough is just walking. Is just walking around, not walking your dog, not necessarily even walking to a destination, just walking. Seeing the trees, seeing the people, seeing your environment, seeing the sky, seeing the clouds, the sun, like maybe not sun. Looking up at the sky. Actually just exploring your environment and beyond is something that is so important and good for you. And it's something that I do not see people do enough. And I think if people approached life more as a game with this terrain just who doesn't do that? Because in a game, you don't know what you're going to discover if you go off the path and you start to like look around. There could be a secret weapon somewhere, or this person that it turns out to have a really delightful story attached to them.
Yes.
There are so many features in games that include when you explore, good stuff happens.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like a lot of us are doing that in games, but in real life, we're like, yeah, I want to stay in my safe bubble.
Yeah, which is understandable. It's understandable and it's valid. And I bet people would have a much more fulfilling life if they took even just that one element of gameplay into the world.
I love it. Well, finishing up, will you leave our audience with any cheat codes that you figured out or life hacks to help them get through the day? Please share.
Yes. It's to pause. It's to pause and give yourself space of just tuning into your body. We're always on the go. We're always disassociating. We're always jumping from thing to thing. We're always consuming something. So things are always being poured into us in a way that's not necessarily healthy. So if you take moments to pause, you don't even have to meditate. Just pause. Take a deep breath. And check in with how you're feeling. How's your body feeling? How's your heart? How's your emotional state?
Well, thank you so much, Amparo. This was an absolute pleasure, and we definitely have to get connected. You're in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
If you want to connect with Amparo, I'll drop her Instagram. I'll drop her website into the show notes, and you can get some amazing empowerment coaching from her and join one of her workshops. I love it. And I hope to see you very soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.